one source that makes people think this way, that teaches them these things, that normalizes all of that, is Islam.
We just have to acknowledge that there is a subset of people in the Muslim world for whom it is true, as they say of themselves, that they love death more than we love life.
Peace will only come when the Arabs change their values, when Muslim countries become democratic.
Maybe you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed. Think you're something out of my nightmares. Seen it right there. But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay
They literally put a bomb in the road, so you see all these cars driving, trying to drive south because they're trying to clear out northern Gaza first, right? You see all these cars, these are families and everything else, and the bomb just blows up. It's not an Israeli rocket, it's a bomb that Hamas put in the road. So they want people to die. That's what Hamas wants. They want everyone to die. They want the Israelis to die, obviously, and they want their own people to die because they are fighting a religious war. We have a largely secular world, a Western world that has some degree of rules, right? And wants a sort of, I don't want to use this word, but like believes in some sort of multicultural, we can have different religions living together and all of those things. They want some of that. And then we have people fighting a religious war. This is a problem. But, I keep talking about this Egyptian border. Here's a tweet from N Wokeness with a couple pictures that'll really illustrate what's going on. Gaza also shares a border with Egypt. To keep Gazans out, Egypt built massive parallel walls, walls, and a super strength steel underground wall. One wall is made of concrete, goes 20 feet high and underground. The other is stone. In addition to the above underground walls, the area is patrolled by the military. There is only one checkpoint to get in to the country, and it's heavily guarded. Believe it or not, I've been there. I think it's the Rafah border, if I'm not mistaken, is the, can we confirm that? The border, it is, right? It's the Rafah gateway, basically, that lets you go from Israel to Sinai, then to get into Egypt proper. And in 1997, a long time ago, it feels like lifetimes ago for me, and a long, long way from where we are now, because obviously it would be insane to do now. I took a bus ride. I went from that border. I took I think it was like a 20-hour bus ride with a zillion stops to get to Cairo. And I spent a week in Egypt. That's another story altogether. But the point is, Egypt has built a border and they don't want the Palestinians in.
No audio?
There's zero audio.
What in the... Oh, okay.
I mean, I could do a bad lip reading if you want.
I muted it. Okay, now I know.
Carry out ethnic cleansing,
This guy's voice is very
land
interesting.
and natural resources.
It doesn't even look like it. He doesn't even look like he should talk like that. It's one of those guys where his voice doesn't match.
Israeli activity to Judaize Jerusalem, demolition of homes, confiscation of land and property, spoiling of
For some reason, they all have the same voice. Very strange.
Yeah, no, it's weird.
resources.
Racist violations perpetrated by Israel.
Israel continues to commit various forms of human rights violations in Palestine.
Israel, the occupying power, is advancing in its efforts of mass colonization and continued apartheid. Put an end to this colonialist regime.
Apartheid, atrocities, and massive destruction inflicted on the
This guy also sounds very weird.
Palestinian people.
War crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, and state terror.
Thank you. United Nations Watch.
Shukran, Sayyid Rais.
So this is our guy, son of Hamas. This is our guy.
I take the floor on behalf of the UN Watch. My name is Mus'ab Hassan Youssef. I grew up in Ramallah as a member of Hamas. I address the words to the Palestinian Authority, which claims to be the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. I ask, where does your legitimacy come from? The Palestinian people did not elect you, and they did not appoint you to represent them. You are self-appointed. Your accountability is not to your own people. This is evidenced by your own total violation for their human rights. In fact, the Palestinian individual and their human development is the least of your concerns. You kidnap Palestinians.
look how they look.
Students from campus and torture them in your jails. You torture your political rivals. The suffering of the Palestinian people is the outcome of your selfish political interest. You are the greatest enemy of the Palestinian people. If Israel did not exist, you would have no one to blame. Take responsibility for the outcome of your own actions. You fan the flames of conflict to maintain your abusive power. Finally, you use this platform to mislead the international community, to mislead the Palestinian society, to believe that Israel is responsible for the problems you create.
Wow.
Thank you.
Look at it. Look at his face. It's cool because he looks like a guy who could like if he were running at you through a field screaming Allahu Akbar, you'd be like, this guy's crazy. But
but man, this speech is brutal. Actually,
yeah, he's brutal.
Wow, this speech is brutal.
That's funny. He gets trained to be brutal his entire life, and then he goes brutal on Hamas.
Yeah,
and we just have to acknowledge that there is a subset of people in the Muslim world for whom it is true, as they say of themselves, that they love death more than we love life. We being free, secular people everywhere, Jews, Christians, moderate Muslims. There are people who actually want to be martyred and see their kids martyred, right? They're not bluffing. They're perfectly willing to die for the pleasure and opportunity of killing non-combatants, intentionally killing non-combatants. So that the moral error that people are going to make now, and they're already making it, is to think that when Israel tells people to evacuate northern Gaza, and they don't because Hamas is telling them not to do it, or it becomes practically impossible, and Egypt doesn't let them out, etc., and they drop bombs targeting Hamas installations that have been purposefully put next to civilian areas that will cause carnage when Israel bombs them, like hospitals and schools and mosques. When Israel bombs those targets and kids die, which is obviously horrible, that is the same thing as Hamas jihadists coming in under cover of rocket fire at dawn and murdering babies in their cribs. It's not the same thing, and body count doesn't resolve that disparity.
And I don't know where I see just one source for these horrible ideas, one source that makes people think this way, that teaches them these things, that normalizes all of that, is Islam. If Islam was absent from their lives, we would see much less of that. And we know it. We know that Islam is, we know that the Quran is full of hating the disbelievers, fighting the disbelievers, making Islam superior, that the Jews are, the worst of the disbelievers. We know that the hadiths say that Muhammad prophesies that the Muslims will fight and kill the Jews, and even the rocks and trees will say there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. If you removed those aspects, this would, the impacts would decrease dramatically, I would say, and there would be much more hope to eventually get rid of all this hate that they learned from a young age.
What's crazy is when you're sitting here watching this video of these kids, and I'm sitting here thinking, well, they look like any other kid who should be just playing with a ball or something like that, or goofing off or reading comics, and they're all sitting there, Jews, 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 got to kill the Jews, got to drive over the Jews, 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 Jews. It's like, gosh, man.
Yeah. This mostly political conflict, said Rose Thorns. There is, of course, politics involved. Of course, there is politics involved, but it is not just it's not political. It's not political because of, politics alone is not enough to lead to all of this. The initial resistance movement and the initial war, the initial fight against the Jews in the region was basically because the Jews are the enemy. The Jews are impure. The Jews come here and want to steal our land, which is holy and which belongs to us, which belongs to Islam. How can we allow this? The Arab nations came together. Muslim nations come together nowadays to express their hate, not because of because they all have some political interest, because they all care about the land that these Zionists are on. It's because of Islam. They will appeal to Islam all the time. I grew up with my whole life being indoctrinated. My whole life I was told that this is our religious duty to stand with the Palestinians because they are in a holy conflict, a holy war, and a day will come that they will win, that we will win. Don't tell me that this is not about religion.
Yeah, and I mean, you would not have to add a word. You could just teach these kids things straight out of the Quran and the Hadith and not add a word to it. You just tell them, look, Surah 5, verse 82, you will find the most vehement in enmity to the believers, the Jews, and al-mushrikun. Jews and Christians are the worst of creatures. Muslims are the best of peoples ever raised up for mankind. Well, if Jews are the worst of creatures and Muslims are the best of peoples, how come the Jews have so much power and 2 billion Muslims can't stop? Because that's how evil and conniving they are and demonic. And what do you got to do? You got to keep fighting them. You got to keep fighting them, and so on. You raise people with this, especially with things, from the Hadith about completely wiping them out. And yep, you got a generation of budding jihadis on your hands.
Yeah.
مش أكيد هدول العمليات ترفع الراس ولفلسطين. العمليات هاي تاعت الدعس والسكاكين هاي إشي بيرفع الراس لفلسطين.
إذا بدك بطلع بستشهد عادي. أنا إن شاء الله أساعد الشباب.
I will fight for ISIS.
مقاوم بالمستقبل مع الدولة الإسلامية.
Yeah, and so on.
And what's crazy is groups like ISIS would love to have these little kids.
Yeah. They want that. They would.
And that little girl.
Yeah, they would look at that and be like,
that little grandma right there.
Yep.
She's a little old for us, but okay.
Personally, I want the Palestinians to have a democratic state with human rights and freedoms. And I wish for all Arabs and Muslims to have the same. But what I want is not necessarily what they want. To solve the problem, you need to understand the problem. And the problem is made up of 2 things. One which Westerners don't understand anymore, religion, and one which Westerners don't want to talk about, values. Religion plays no role at all in European politics. In the US, politicians do say God bless America, and the debate surrounding abortion is partly religious. But when it comes to foreign policies, you don't hear American generals talk about spreading the word of Jesus. In the Muslim world, it is very different. When Arabs kill Jews at a music festival, or Christians in a school in Nigeria, or one another in Syria, Yemen, Libya, what is it they shout? Allahu Akbar, God is great. Jihad is a religious war against the infidels. To many Europeans, the words infidels and heresy probably remind them of dark days that played out hundreds of years ago, when Catholics and Protestants were killing each other. Sadly, this is still the situation in some parts of the Muslim world. Just think about the organizations you hear about in the Muslim world: Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, the Taliban. These aren't national organizations. They are all religious organizations. Now let's talk about the bigger issue, values. Lots of people run from this as if they were running from fire because the biggest concern is potentially being called a racist. I want to be 100% clear here, although I know that some will do their best to misunderstand me. If I say that men are more violent than women, does it mean I hate all men? No. Does it mean that I think all men are violent? No. Does it mean that there are no violent women? No. But if in almost all countries, more than 90% of those in jails are men, then you can say that men are more violent than women. I believe you can criticize anyone for anything. You can criticize me as a Jew, as an Israeli, as a man, as a tour guide. You can criticize me for things I can't change, like my identity, and for the things I chose, like my profession, the music I like, the fact that I'm a father. My identity is comprised of thousands of different aspects, and you can criticize any one of them, and I can agree or disagree. I can say, true, Israelis aren't very polite and they don't know how to form a queue, but I'm different. And I can also accept the criticism. If you are not a narcissist, you know that you're not perfect. I don't subscribe to the narrative that you're only allowed to say good things about other groups and criticize your own. I actually want to be criticized. I want to be made to think, to be made to improve my ways. The Me Too movement made me rethink the way I interact with women and made me more aware of the language I use. I criticize all groups: Americans, Germans, Britney Spears fans, ultra-Orthodox Jews, women, Gen Z, and Muslims. I even criticize the most dangerous group of all, Israeli mothers. If a teacher writes that she is sick, there is no need for 30 get well soon messages. You don't show that you care by writing a message. You're just spamming my WhatsApp. If there were peace in all of the Middle East and only the Arab Muslim Palestinians were resorting to violence, I would say, okay, maybe we are in the wrong. But if the Palestinians were using violence before 1967 and before 1948, and almost all of the Arab Muslim countries are dictatorships with high levels of violence and low levels of human rights, then maybe there's really a problem here. I'm also getting comments from Muslims blaming colonialism and the Americans for all the problems in the Muslim world. And it is true that the creation of many countries and borders in Africa and Asia were determined by the interest of the European empires, and that the US think primarily about its own interest. But I'm always shocked to find that Muslims take no responsibility for their wrongdoing. The fact that most of the Muslim countries aren't democratic has nothing to do with the US. The fact that 17 of the 20 most dangerous countries for the LGBTQ community are Muslims has nothing to do with colonialism. The fact that almost all of the most dangerous places in the world to be Christians are Muslim has nothing to do with imperialism. The Muslim world is huge. It has a lot of oil, and its failure has very little to do with colonialism. Look at the Jews. 1/3 of them were murdered by the Nazis. Israel has no oil, and it is surrounded by enemies. And yet we are successful. And it's not because of American money. Most of that money has to be used to buy military equipment from American companies. And beside, the Palestinians get way more money. We are successful because we are open-minded, think outside the box, invest in education, and are not violent. This is true outside the Middle East too. Look at Arab Muslim communities in Europe. If there were violent riots in Paris or Sweden, Rotterdam or London, would it be in the Jewish neighborhoods or the Arab neighborhoods? Peace will only come when the Arabs change their values, when Muslim countries become democratic, when all of the different groups in Syria stop killing one another, when Iranian women are free to cover or not cover their hair, when gay men are not thrown from rooftops in Gaza or thrown into jail by the PLO, when the Christian population stops shrinking in the Middle East, and when the Israeli Arabs stop killing one another, then and only then will there be true peace.
Got me coming back for more, even when I've been screwed. Dolls full of pins, pierce my heart straight through. I got issues in my head, I like you in my bed, but you keep me on red. Oh, everything is like a test, I better not text or I'll come off desperate.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, baby, you'll get